Talia first heard the legend of the copper eclipse while crouched beside her grandmother's hearth, the smell of cardamom milk curling through the rafters. Her grandmother's fingers, gentle but scarred by years of spinning wire into jewelry, traced a diagram in the ash, a blazing ring, a dim pearl, and a ribbon of shimmering streaks. "Once every few lifetimes," grandmother whispered, "the sun and moon meet as lovers, light passing through light, and the earth below reflects their dance upon rivers that turn to liquid metal. Witness a child and you will see time itself change color." Talia had been 7, too young to grasp allegory, but old enough to clutch a promise tight as any talisman. In the sun-baked kingdom of Seri, metallurgy was faith. Copper veined the cliffs like lifeblood, and molten channels crisscrossed the forges each night, glowing like miniature dawns. When Talia came of age, she apprenticed to the Royal Observatory, an improbable path for a tinsmith's granddaughter, but one she earned by mapping the orbits of 3 faint asteroids on discarded parchment. She spent nights on the Citadel's roof, cataloguing stellar minutiae, while the city below shimmered with crucibles and anvils. Yet always, behind the technical charts, she kept her grandmother's ashes diagram alive in memory. Ring, pearl, river. A brittle scrawl in the observatory archives finally gave her hope. Copied 2 centuries earlier, it described an eastern umbral path during which the solar disk bronzes, the lunar rim brightens, and all waterways alloy into shining flux, as though Mercury itself courses through the Earth. The scribe called it the copper eclipse. Calculations scribbled in the margins predicted the next occurrence within Talia's lifetime, indeed, within the coming year, though the precise line of totality lay in the ungoverned lands beyond the Dross Mountains. She petitioned the Royal Council for an expedition, but was rebuffed. "The Auric mines are at risk from bandits," the Chancellor intoned. "We cannot spare guards, so you may chase a bedtime story." So Talia did what generations of dream-struck Saharians had done. She went to the smithies. Most nights, the smiths hammered by starlight, singing off-key hymns to heat and metal. Among them was Joran, a broad-shouldered forge master who had melted more bronze than Talia had read words. She found him gathering slag into molds shaped like moons. "I need sponsorship," she blurted, over clangs and hisses, "for a journey east. But what I bring back could revolutionize your craft. Imagine witnessing a river turn to copper before your eyes." Joran tipped one molded crescent from its frame, studying its cool glint. "I have read the same scroll," he said, surprising her. The scribe Ilverus claimed the phenomenon forged a blade so light it floated. He named it Loonshade. Some say it's myth, others say it hangs in the armory of the vanished city of Mirza. Either way, you'll need more than coin. You'll need companionship. Within a fortnight, the expedition of Radiant Alloy numbered 5. Talia brought charts and sextant. Joran, portable smelters and crucibles. Aislinn, a caravan scout fluent in 3 smuggler argots. Brother Mikkel, a monk who saw in the eclipse the fulfillment of an apocryphal prophecy. And Silent Row, whose title was half reputation, half warning. The palace refused them passage through the north gate, so they left by night through the overflow sewers, stepping across cold filaments of discarded tin until they met the desert's breath. Travel through wasteland is unkind to instruments. Sand etched the sextant, wind warped scrolls, and every day the sun glared like a smith unhappy with his ingot. Yet Talia's excitement burned brighter. Each dusk she measured elongations, refining the predicted line of totality. She spoke of corona petals and Bailey's beads. The others listened, more for her zeal than the jargon. Even Silent Row allowed himself a rare half-smile when she explained how the moon, far smaller than the sun, could eclipse it entirely because it was so much nearer. Nearness, Talia said, creates miracles. On the 11th night, they reached the Dross Mountains. Copper oxide stained the rock a mottled green, as though verdigris tears seeped from granite eyes. There was an abandoned mine pit at the pass crest, and inside they met their first obstacle, people too hungry to consider astronomy. Bandits emerged from shadows, blades ragged as cliff edges. Silent Roe and Joran planted themselves like an anvil and hammer, but Brother Mikkel stepped forward, palms upturned, reciting, "As the moon intercedes the sun, so mercy must intercede wrath." The bandits hesitated, perhaps amused, perhaps confused. During that pause, Aislinn distributed hardtack and waterskins, trading talk of safe wells on the far side. Hunger turned to parley, steel returned to sheaths. That night the bandits shared their fire. Across the flames, their leader, a woman named Yishara with a serrated grin, told a story. "We have witnessed blood eclipses," she said, "when the moon reddens and howls fill the slopes. But copper? Never. Yet my grandmother spoke similar words. It is said the heavens are smithies too, forging destinies as bright as sword edges." Talia listened, struck by how myths travel parallel paths, converging like orbits. She realized the copper eclipse, if real, must mean something different to each watcher. To Joran, the possibility of weightless alloys. To Brother Mikkel, a covenant renewed. To bandits, perhaps a chance to recast their names in legend rather than infamy. She wondered what it would mean to her beyond fulfilling a childhood vow. They descended dross into the lowlands, where rivers laced the earth like quicksilver threads, too bright to be stone but too opaque to be water. These were the fabled Mercury marshes, poisonous, glittering, and mesmerizing. Fumes roiled above mirror-smooth surfaces, distorting reflections into monstrous apparitions. Aislinn commandeered scavenged planks to build a flat-bench boat, while Joran donned a mask of charcoal-soaked cloth. "We cross at first light," he said, "before heat wakes the vapor." On the water, each stroke scattered tiny waves that rejoined behind them seamlessly, like parted silk stitching itself closed. Mid-river, Talia peered over the gunwale. She saw the sun and the moon sharing the same sky-sun high, moon faint but visible, a gauzy coin by day. Suddenly she understood why legends tied them together. You could not mistake their eventual convergence once you saw them in the same frame. It was akin to glimpsing two dancers entering a hall from opposite doors. You knew inevitably they would meet at center floor. The far shore rose in gentle terraces of copper-tinged clay. They camped under acacia trees whose leaves clinked like small bells in wind. Joran unpacked his miniature foundry, feeding it charcoal until the crucible glowed orange. "Practice run," he said, melting ore he'd gathered from the dross tailings. The others watched as molten metal pooled, reflecting not just the fire but the sky beyond, which had darkened to cobalt. Talia leaned over. Within the liquid she saw starfields swimming like fish. Brother Mikkel spent the night copying a manuscript, the flicker of embers illuminating his marginalia. Copper, eclipse, union of opposites, heliacal marriage. He looked up. They say the monk Alvar once wrote, "When Sol and Luna embrace, all sins are annealed." "Do you believe that?" Talia, measuring arc seconds, answered, "I believe annealing requires heat, time, and patience. Sins, like metal, change form under the right conditions." Days turned to weeks. They followed the line Talia plotted, ever eastward, measuring parallax at dusk and dawn. Once, storms forced them to shelter in basalt caves. Another time, Iceland lured away a pride of copper-maned lions with dried fish, an absurd tactic that inexplicably, and gradually the world seemed to prepare itself. Clouds grew rarer, air clearer, desert pigments intensified as though waiting to erupt into a single, overwhelming hue. 2 nights before predicted totality, they reached an ancient riverbed, dry for centuries, but still etched deep. Its walls were striated layers, sandstone, then verdigris, then a seam of pure, uncorroded copper that ran continuous, glimmering in moonlight. "The old texts mention rivers of metal," Talia murmured. Maybe this was once literal. Perhaps volcanic heat melted the copper and a flood carved it away. She pictured molten streams streaming, reflecting the sky so perfectly that a traveler might believe the heavens had descended into earth. They made base camp on the bluff. Joran and Silent Row erected the largest crucible atop a tripod of quartz pillars. They packed it with charcoal and raw ore, planning to feed it molten copper from the anticipated flow, if such a flow occurred. Brother Mikkel set up prayer flags stitched with sunbursts and crescents. Iceland scouted escape routes in case seismic activity accompanied the eclipse. Talia, meanwhile, prepared 3 telescopes: broad aperture for corona study, pinhole for pinpoints on parchment, and a makeshift camera obscura inside a silk tent where the sun's image would project onto a white sheet. The dawn of the eclipse arrived crystalline. The sun rose like a gong struck against glass. Even the wind seemed to hush. Talia checked the moon's position. Altogether ordinary, still far to the west. Yet timing told the rest. By midday, the moon would slide before the sun, cloaking day and twilight. What legends called a dance was, in mathematics, a predictable waltz. Still, math could not capture hearts thudding in anticipation. They ate rationed dates, they drank sparingly from water skins, and then the moon's leading edge kissed the sun. A notch appeared, delicate as a bite in a golden fruit. Talia's breath stopped. She called times at regular intervals, noting how the sky colour shifted from cerulean to indigo ahead of schedule. Birds quieted. Insects whirred as though dawn were running backward. Halfway to totality, sunlight filtering through leaves formed crescents on the ground. Joran, laughing like a boy, placed a slotted spoon above white cloth to pattern hundreds of tiny moons. Brother Mikkel knelt, whispering liturgy in which copper was both purifier and mirror. Silent Row stood at cliff edge, muscles taut as though guarding against intangible dangers. Then the moment. The moon slid perfectly over the sun, and the world leapt into elsewhere. Day became deepest dusk. The corona burst outward, copper gold haloed with hints of rose. Unlike usual whitish coronas, this one glimmered warm, as though infused with molten metal. Gasps escaped everyone's lips, even Silent Row's. Talia felt tears wick sideways in the sudden cool wind. Below, in the ancient riverbed, rock cracked, a seam split, and from beneath a glow surfaced, the colour of minted coins fresh from quench. Molten copper rose, thick yet bright, flowing as though awakened by celestial command. It spilled along the channel, reflecting the eclipsed sun-moon, making good on every word of legend. Rivers of liquid metal. Joran shouted instructions, voice trembling. He and Silent Row guided the flow via carved grooves toward the crucible. Copper poured in, ringing like bells when droplets struck the rim. Sparks scattered into the dimness like orange fireflies. Heislan, eyes wide, said, "If I die today, I'll blame you all for not telling me magic was real." Talia, meanwhile, had to decide. Observe heavenly wonders or earthly miracle? She compromised. She looked through the broad aperture telescope for 30 seconds, memorizing the copper corona's filaments. Then she ran to the river edge. Kneeling, she dipped a metal ladle, one grandmother had used to shape jewelry, into the molten stream. Heat singed her arms, but she held steady as copper filled the scoop. In that fiery bowl, the eclipsed disk shimmered, a black center ringed with living fire, a quake rippled, stones clattered. Brother Mikkel's flag snapped in wind that tasted metallic. He raised his voice. "When the light is halved, the heart must double." Perhaps nonsense, yet fitting, the flow thickened, slowed, totality neared its end. Talia dashed to the silk tent. On the white sheet, the projected image of sun and moon showed the slightest crescent of brightness returning. She sketched it quickly, hand smudging charcoal. Outside, the first diamond ring effect exploded, a brilliant bead of light where sunlight speared past a lunar valley. The world brightened. Shadows regained edges. Birds resumed song, tentative. Within minutes, day was restored. But subtly wrong, as though painted with a warmer palette. The molten river continued, but calmer, now only in pockets and pools. Joran examined the crucible. "Yeah, enough for ingots, maybe more," he said, voice thick with awe. "This alloy, look, it's lighter already." He lifted a ladleful after brief cooling. The metal glowed rosy even as it solidified, but when he laid it on a scale, it weighed half expectation. "Copper, tempered by heaven's fire," he whispered. Even Silent Rose spoke. "Make a blade." They poured molds, a dagger for Ro, a crosier top for Mikkel, a set of thin rods for Islin. "Lockpicks for every door in existence," she joked. And for Talia, a simple ring size to her grandmother's finger. When cooled, each artifact gleamed with a subtle iridescence that flickered between copper and rose gold. No one could say what properties they held. Yet already Mikkel's crosier felt warm as heartbeat. Ro's dagger sliced air with uncanny ease. Islin's rods chimed at the faintest touch. Night fell after a sunset more vivid than any before. They built no fire. The new metal objects glowed enough. Over cold rations, they shared silence until Brother Mikkel began a tale. "The marriage of sun and moon is older than any creed. Perhaps faith is the metal, and we are but ore." No one argued. The next weeks were a slow return journey burdened by treasure. Word spread ahead of them like sunrise. When they reached the outskirts of Sarah, crowds lined the streets. Artisans begged glimpses of the legendary copper. Children ran beside the caravan chanting, "Sun metal! Metal!" The royal council had no choice but grant audience. In the great hall, Joran demonstrated a wafer-thin sheet that floated on heated air currents like a feather, refusing to tarnish. Islin's rods opened the locked treasury doors with a shy click. Silent Rose sliced a silk scarf mid-air without fraying edges. Brother Mikkel touched his crosier to a cracked marble column, and the fissure's heat sealed, as though repelled by fracture. Yet it was Talia who stepped forward last, holding the small copper ring. "Artifacts amaze," she said, "but knowledge outlives artifacts." She unfurled charcoal sketches, measurements, and a redried table of eclipse periodicity. She described how proximity, alignment, and subterranean geology conspired. "We witnessed myth," she concluded, "and found physics inside poetry." The Chancellor, once dismissive, bowed. An incline so shallow it nearly escaped notice, yet within palace etiquette it equated to apology. Talia's team received not only pardon for unsanctioned travel, but commission to establish a combined observatory and metallurgical guild to investigate further alignments and Earth responses. Late that night, Talia returned to her grandmother's hearth, now her own workshop. She placed the copper ring atop the ashes, recreating the old diagram. Blazing circle, dim pearl, and a tiny copper river she drew with powdered filings. Then she slid the ring onto her finger. It felt alive, pulse syncing with her own. She thought of that molten ladle, reflecting Eclipse, the precise instant myth bent down to touch reality. It was not just the heavens that had changed color. It was her understanding that all stories are alloys, part lie, part truth, made strong by fusion. Some alloys, like the copper eclipse, reveal the heat within us, our hunger to witness wonder and return with proof that wonder never truly ends. Midnight chimed. She opened the shutter. Moonlight, unremarkable again, poured across rooftops, silver rather than copper. Somewhere below, rivers murmured their usual dark water. Yet Talia smiled, for she had seen them burn. Someday another child would listen, by another hearth, and trace circles in ash sun, moon, river, and a myth would become a map again.